Linnea, and welcome to Visited by Voices.
Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. Hey, Sam, how are you?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm still kind of I'm still tired from Thanksgiving. I don't even know what day it is. I spent Thanksgiving at Chris went over to his parents. I had to stay behind to study. So I had like ramen with a burger and an egg in it, which was pretty solid. But I feel like Thanksgiving was both yesterday and ages ago, if that makes any sense. That'll tell you where my head's at right now.
Isn't it wonderful how holidays have become synonymous with exhaustion?
It's been like that for it was like that for a long time, especially so I messed up my neck really badly back in 2012, and I'm not sure exactly what caused it, but for a few years, like I would just have really bad chronic pain. It would just kind of like radiate down one side. I later found out that my head's not on straight. It sits at a tilt, so my head's usually like this. Um, yeah, I know. My head's not on straight. It's a great joke. But there were Thanksgivings and Christmases where I had to cook like whole banquets for me and my mom because she wanted like a full dinner. I'm like, it would kill me every year, just like the worst pain. So I'm glad I don't have to do that now.
Yeah, so I think that we put a lot of pressure as a society on the individual and on families about the holidays. When I say the holidays, I'm not really including the fun holidays. I'm including everything, everything from Thanksgiving through New Year's, maybe including Mother's Day. And Father's Day is not as pressureful as Mother's Day for some reason. I don't know why that is, but definitely culturally, we put a lot of pressure to get things right and to follow certain traditions, which I'm not sure makes really any sense. I
Yeah.
mean, we're supposed to be celebrating family and together and the people you love, and if you're religious, you're supposed to be, celebrating the gathering together of people under a common flag, right? Basically, a common set of beliefs, and I don't see how any of that has anything to do with turkey basters or hologrammatic wrapping paper. I just don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, we usually just go over to my in-laws to celebrate, but the thing is like they're so laid back. Pretty much holidays are the same as, most of the weekly get-togethers where it's like we come over and we eat and we hang out and that's it. So it's really low pressure, which is it's like the greatest feeling. So yeah, way better now. I mean, I'm not one for, nobody dresses up or anything like that. We all just sit around in jeans or sweats or whatever we have.
Yeah, I went over my parents right from work because I had to work on the holiday, and so my meal was actually microwaved, but which I don't mind. That's fine because actually stuffing tastes a little bit better actually the second time around.
True.
Uh, but yeah, no, I was like, I stopped long enough to just throw on like whatever, so no one cared at that point.
No.
But holidays are not really usually the focus of this channel.
No,
um,
it's current events.
Current events. In other news, North Korea.
Hmm.
Um, but what I wanted to talk about today was a little bit was point of view characters, and I think I found a way to actually express something that I've been having trouble to expressing for a long time. Dan and I had Mr. Dan Shine of Flesh Wound Features,
Who
and I
else?
had a snippet of a conversation, not a full conversation, but a snippet of a conversation about the most recent Hellraiser film. And the thing is, that movie does a lot right that no sequel in that series since the second film has done well.
Hmm.
But it still feels kind of rote it's hard to really like throw your arms enthusiastically around that movie for some reason. And I think I figured out what it is, and it's that it doesn't really have a point of view character. We don't have that character to go along with the ride for. You need a character that you can relate to. They don't have to be sympathetic necessarily, or they don't have to be a good character, but they have to be someone that you can relate to and identify where they're at.
Mhm.
And every character in that film is kind of an awful human being at an awful place in their lives. So that whole like, oh my God, they're in over their head just comes off as, man, let's see them get killed.
I actually had that same the feeling with Everybody's Horrible, in some way, because I'm still reading The Hellbound Heart.
Mhm.
Although, it feels like for me, like Julia is more like the point of view character.
Well, I mean, I think in literature, there's a little bit more room to develop a character internally, right? So you can kind of get away with more.
Hmm.
You can convince the reader more that they're following someone that's interesting. In film, this is not the room, right? You have some dialogue and you have like what they're wearing. And that's pretty much what you got.
Yep.
Maybe how they interact with other characters. But I don't want to talk about Hellraiser at all. I want to talk about your favorite film and my favorite film and how they both use point of view characters and why I believe that's the reason that Ghostbusters is your favorite film and Bride of Frankenstein is mine. So
Okay.
I want to start with Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters has 4 core characters, right?
Yeah.
So you got Egon the scientist, right? He's
Mhm.
already died in the wool. He already gets what's going on because it's been proven to him through the scientific method.
True.
You got Ray, who's basically into woo-woo, right? He's like kind of the hardcore believer. He's the Fox Mulder.
He's a mix of both, to be fair, because him and Egon are still best scientist buds. But yeah, he's definitely also got the more mystic side, hence the occult bookstore, and also all of his occult knowledge.
Right. So he's not can't be really the again, he's already gone through that journey.
Hmm.
So he can't be the point of view character either. Winston can't be the point of view character because he's basically a running joke. The idea is he's there for the paycheck, right? That's the character.
That's why we love him.
And it's very much a character that we can relate to, and he's great for playing the straight man in every scene they need him to. But he's actually not the point of view character. A lot of people think he is. The point of view character, unsurprisingly, is Bill Murray, right? Because he's the scamster who's along for this ride, but he's experiencing it with the audience. That's why he's there from the beginning. That's why we're introduced to him being a charlatan with fake pseudoscience, right?
Yeah.
So we're brought into that world. That's why he has to get slimed in the hallway, because that's us getting slimed. That's our baptism into the world of the Ghostbusters, right? So he's that point of view character, and I don't find it surprising that Bill Murray's kind of caustic, deadpan sense of humor, Sam. No offense, but I can see it in you.
No, really?
Yeah, a little bit. So it's really not surprising that like Ghostbusters would be a film that resonates with you.
Well, Venkman was my favorite Ghostbuster growing up, but the older I got, I feel like my preference of Ghostbusters has changed. But before I get into that, I would say also Dana is a big point of view character because she's the one that these hauntings are happening to. And, her entry into this is the eggs jumping out of the carton onto the counter and boiling. So, but yeah, as far as like Ghostbusters go, Venkman was my favorite. And then it kind of, progressed to Egon. Egon's pretty much been my mainstay for like the last 15 years, I think. And I mean, no offense to Ray. Ray is Chris's favorite Ghostbuster because it's the one that's most like him. I never really built that rapport with Ray. Winston, though, Winston has a special place in my heart because it's like, we can all relate to him. How many of us are working a job just for the paycheck?
Right, man. Listen, Kevin Smith took Ghostbusters, one character from Ghostbusters, and turned it into a franchise. Because Clerks is just, Winston getting a job at a convenience store.
Speaking of Clerks, did you happen to see Clerks 3?
No.
Wasn't bad. I was surprised. But again, it's still kind of the Kevin Smith retread in a lot of ways.
I'll see it eventually. I haven't been passionate for a long time about Kevin Smith. But that's okay. He's still Jersey. He's still good with me.
There you go.
But Well, I find that interesting that you've had an evolution through it, but I can see Ghostbusters, like as a film, the attitude of the film kind of is Venkman's attitude,
Yeah, it is
right? And
rather. It's very cynical in a lot of areas.
cynical, surly, slightly out of control, but also kind
Mhm.
of restrained and at a distance. It's interesting. It really is. The movie is anchored with that character's personality.
Yeah,
You can't get scenes like, are you a god? And the payoff of that without having a character like Venkman. You just can't.
and I still love that one.
Exceptional writing, by the way. I think that we tend to give credit to the actors when they deserve it. They're awesome, but oh my god, that screenplay works,
It
right?
does.
It's so tight. And that's kind of why the second film is a big step down, because the actors are still bringing everything, right? They're all
Mhm.
still really good. In fact, the new supporting actors are probably even better, but the screenplay is just a mess.
Yeah, it's not the best, but it's a solid Christmas slash New Year's movie. I watch it, pretty much every year around this time. Same with Batman Returns. But Peter
Um,
McNichol as Janosch is just inspired in Ghostbusters 2 because he made up this whole backstory for Janosch, including a flag of the country that Janosch would be from.
um, but so my favorite film is Bride of Frankenstein, and the big surprise with Bride of Frankenstein, unlike the first film, is that the point of view character is not Dr. Frankenstein. It's the monster. And that's the big shift. We see that world through the monster's eyes from the very beginning of that movie. We see all the absurdity, all the craziness. And that's why it's important that the monster gets his voice, because it's that appropriate moment. Since we're seeing through his eyes, we have to hear him speak. It's not a question. He's trapped between a creator who, like an absentee father who doesn't want him, and a mad doctor who wants to manipulate him and seems to be offering him kind of the devil and Jesus on the hilltop, hey, all this can be yours, all you have to do is whatever I want.
Mhm.
And it's very interesting that the monster becomes the point of view character for the audience. We relate mostly to the monster in that film. It's why when the bride turns on him, goes just that full bore evil swan hissing, man, it feels apocalyptic, and we all feel like our hearts just drop to the fucking floor. It's a brutal moment, that moment of rejection, and then he brings it all down, and that's in many ways, as much as I do like the later sequels, it's kind of the perfect ending for that character, because it's the perfect exit point for the viewer of the franchise.
Mhm.
Um, but if you look at like my interests and where I come from, of course, Frankenstein monster would be my point of view character, right? I felt this way my entire life. Like fire bad makes sense to me. You know, hey, these people are all bullies. I wish I could drown a few children. That's completely like emotionally my mindset at kind of at all times. Whereas you go between desperately seeking like companionship and raging, right? Because that is me, and that's the Frankenstein monster. So I mean, so what I'm getting at with these examples is just that I think if everyone out there, if you shout out your favorite movies in the chat, by the way, and the favorite and I think if you identify the point of view character in that film, you're going to see a hell of a mirror to look into. I really think that's true.
I agree. And, somewhat bouncing off from, your own way of relating to Frankenstein's monster. For me, because I was thinking about that, when you're saying to the chat, think about your favorite movies. And the first one that just popped up in my head was The Rage Carrie 2, because that was a time of my life. It was like, 1997, I think it was when it came out. And I was just,
Okay.
I was still a young teenager, but also I was already filled with all of the angst. And I was already like not fitting in. And I was and I had been bullied so badly because I was going to Catholic school. And those bitches are fucking ruthless. Like, not in the good way, not in the heinous bitch kind of way. So, yeah, I got bullied a ton. It's like definitely feeling like the outcast all the time. And who wouldn't want to slaughter them in a video game?
Right. I mean, these are the outlets that films let us live our most pure version of ourselves without actually having to go there. My second and third favorite films of all time are Natural Born Killers and Heathers, right? Are you
Oh,
starting?
Matt
Are
Sanders.
you, if you think about the point of view characters, starting to detect a theme? I mean, it's really about trying to find a relationship that works in a world that you cannot relate to. That is kind of my experience.
Oh yeah.
So I find it kind of fascinating that movies are provide such a glimpse into yourself if you let them.
hmm
You
No,
know,
I completely agree with that. And I mean, I wouldn't say that I related hardcore to Nancy and A Nightmare on Elm Street because, it's like I've never really been part of like a close friend circle that much to the point where it's like, oh, my life is like so perfect and suburban and idyllic, right? It didn't look anything like that, right? And, but that's, what eventually got me into Dream Theory. I probably related more to, some of the other characters in that franchise than Nancy. Definitely Alice. I was more of an Alice than a Nancy.
did you eventually start punching a punching bag just in the middle of a montage?
Well, not punching, although I did decide, like, when I was training to be a wrestler, I decided to spear the punching bag we had in our apartment, and that was a really fucking stupid idea.
Doesn't sound great.
No, it was really bad. But
So
yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, what's nice about being an Alice is that I eventually went on to marry a Johnson. So I had, even though my last name isn't Johnson.
So Mike is saying that he is the Terminator. Well, the Terminator is not the point of view character of that movie. But I think there might be something to be said that for someone who works a retail job, feels like they're running in place and thinks that their future is almost weaponized, right? That's kind of what the Sarah Connor thing is. No, I'm not talking about the second film with all the okay, she does push-ups and suddenly she's a freaking mastermind warrior, which makes no sense whatsoever. But it still makes more sense than Laurie Strode in Halloween, whatever. But
oh God, please don't mention Halloween. I can't.
That's gonna be over. That's the last mention. But no, I think that if you look at something like the Terminator, a lot of our regular fears are wrapped up there. Like certainly apocalyptic fears, but also personal like futility fears. Like that idea that a normal person might hold the key to the future, but through almost happenstance, right? Like, what if I miss my big opportunity to be important?
Yeah,
And
that's a very real human fear.
right, and Sarah Connor is just a name in a phone book. It's kind of like that opening shot from Psycho, whereas Hitchcock just decides to go to one window and we get one story. But if he'd gone to a different window, we would have gotten a completely different story. It's the same thing. If the Terminator had stopped, they had chosen the right Sarah Connor to visit first, everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think there's something. I do think that there's a lot of us in these movies, and I think that plays out. Jessica of the soon to be launching Manifesting Fear YouTube channel has asked, how's it going? It is going exhausting. I'm going to do this show and then I'm going the fuck to sleep.
That's so metal of you.
That's it. I might not even leave this chair. It might
Just
be right here that yeah, who gives a shit at this point? Mike is saying he just wants to have a six-pack and shades. Does that make me a bad person?
I thought you were talking about a six-pack of beer, and I was like, you can just buy beer.
That's easy to do. Well, you can make both those things happen, sir. Neither are impossible.
It just means like having an insane workout regimen and never enjoying the foods you like ever again.
Right. Eating a lot of carrots.
Also a lot of grilled chicken.
I like grilled chicken.
And lentils.
I'm not crazy about lentils.
No, not for me. Only in small doses.
I do find myself liking a lot of grains, though. I'm a big rice guy.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I had some tabbouleh for the first time, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, but it was great. And I mixed it with some chicken and some tomatoes. So it's like bougie lady pasta salad. It's the same thing as pasta salad, except it's tabbouleh instead of spaghetti or pasta.
I don't know where to go after that.
Okay, well, here's the best part. So, you know how I sing to my cats all the time, right?
Well, everyone sings to their cats. You want to
Yes,
hear the Num Num
exactly.
song?
So
I
it's
can't.
like, I found that Lucy likes when I sing Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo to her, but only if I start out with Chicken Taboola, Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo.
Exactly.
I gotta record these one day.
A song for cats.
Yes.
So, if anyone out there has any questions for us tonight, just preface your chat with the word question in all caps so I don't miss it because I'm a friggin' moron who can barely read. Speaking of reading, I still don't have a release date on the book, but the exciting news is that there will be a hardcover of Divide by Zero that gets issued simultaneously with the paperback. So, people, if you want to spend a little bit more and get a little bit nicer of an edition, that's going to be in your future. So
That's going to be very cool. I'm sorry I'm having to let the cats in and out right now. That's why I keep having to lean over, get the door. I'm just their slave. So
that's how life works.
So I've had to take a break from really doing any like serious movie watching, just until I'm done with this test. But I am starting to put together my top horror movies of 2022. And I mean, there's still a lot I haven't gotten to yet, but somehow, like in the top 5, it's Master, Choose or Die. I don't know how Fresh made it to number 3. I'm very surprised. And then Mid-Century, and then number 5 is Monstrous. So could be worse.
Monstrous, wow, that's interesting. I think it's a fun little movie. With it's fun. It's definitely on the positive side of the ledger this year. This was a great freaking year for movies, wasn't it?
We had more hits than misses,
and that's not normally the case.
It is not. Although, like right now, as far as the bottom of my list goes, Firestarter's still at the bottom, and I don't think it's going to be going anywhere. And then Them is second to the bottom. So
didn't see that. I made a pact with myself last year that I was when something was just definitely unlikely to be something I'd enjoy, I wasn't going to put myself through it.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine.
There's just too much good out there to really bother. And and then luckily, being part of this community, I have people who will kind of give me the ups and downs on stuff that they know will just annoy the shit out of me. So I don't have to go through it. I mean, even when you get something that's a very mixed reaction, right? So something like the Pet Sematary remake from 2 years ago now. I don't know, whenever that came out. I looked at it and I said, I don't think I care. And pretty much everyone said, well, it's fine, it's good. And that reaction let me know that I'll keep the Pet Sematary I have. Thank you. If you like the Pet Sematary you have, you can keep the Pet Sematary.
And other lies told by your government.
You do not need to have the new one. And I didn't need the new one. And I don't think that was a mistake. So I think Firestarter is probably the same deal. I don't love the original Firestarter. So I can't, and I don't think the novel's it's not one of the better King novels of its time. Definitely. I don't think I need it in my life. More Firestarter.
No, I mean, please don't, because it's like the original Firestarter is not a very good movie as it is. This one is even worse. And I was like, how? But okay. I mean, the highlight of the movie is the cat getting set on fire because it's hilarious.
This has been a good year for pet death on film, actually. I mean,
you should just do an entire video about
pet I think death. I am going to. I always wanted to do because there was a point where I wanted to do individual videos on tropes that I find particularly amusing. And one of the classic tropes is called Going Back for the Cat, which is actually a misnomer because it comes from Alien, right? The idea that Ripley will risk her life for the cat, which is absurd. I know, no matter how much you like Jonesy, it's absurd.
I would go back for the cat.
I don't believe that for a second if you were actually in that situation. But the other example people always point out is Amityville Horror when Brolin runs back to open the door and let the dog out. It's hilarious. But I always wanted to do a video on that, so maybe I should just do a pet trauma video.
Oh my gosh, it could be like the old Fox series when animals attack. Yes. When animals get killed on film.
oh my god, I'm telling you, if that scene was not in Smile, there would be nothing in that movie I enjoyed. But I mean, it's a funny movie because it's so friggin' overwrought, and it's for the Conjuring fans. That's what it's for.
Ew.
But the scene where the kid opens the birthday gift and the dead cat's inside, and it's the funniest thing. It's hilarious. I love cats, but that scene, hilarious. So if you're saying a cat gets set on fire on Firestarter, that does help the film a bit.
I mean, you could just look up that one scene. You'll be fine.
Okay. Mike, I'm not sure if I did see the trailer you tagged me on. Throw the title at me if you would. The last couple days have been like, I don't know, clarity challenged to me because I've been working a lot and dealing with dumb crap, as well as good and also good stuff like last minute stuff with the publisher. So I might have missed it. I don't know. Throw it at me though, man. I don't mean to ignore anything. Dan says he's going to be grabbing the hardcore edition, the hardcover edition.
The hardcore.
Well, that's the other version of the book. Midnight says, very exciting. That's cool. Holiday Style says, don't think I've ever heard your thoughts on Tarantino movies. Go for it.
It depends on the Tarantino movie, but at least he's doing weird shit as a director. I mean, the Kill Bill movies are great. Wow, is that really? That can't be the only Tarantino movie I've seen. What is wrong with me?
Have you seen the Pulp Fiction?
No, I have not.
The Reservoir Dogs?
No, I did see Django Unchained because my roommates were watching a whole bunch of Tarantino movies, and I was like, I'm bored, and I was like, oh look, a movie. Wow,
Jackie Brown?
Shit, have I? Huh?
The Jackie Brown?
No, I should see that though.
That's actually pretty good.
Well, Pam Grier's perfect, so.
Oh,
I see Natural Born Killers. That's right.
Yeah. His screenplay is like a jumping off point only. It doesn't bear any real semblance to the finished film. So I was a big fan of Reservoir Dogs when it came out. Like a big fan. I recognized all the influences. I recognized they ripped off the opening scene of Q from Larry Cohen. But at the point where you're ripping off Larry Cohen, you're kind of saying you're part of our club, right? So it's okay. And I do think Reservoir Dogs holds up just fine. It's a great little pressure cooker of a movie with some real moral ambiguity. Pulp Fiction I was really excited for when it came out, and when I saw it in theaters, I liked it quite a lot. And then I saw it a second time in theaters, and I kind of just was watching the screen going, why isn't this affecting me the second time? I saw it one more time on home video with friends, and I actually disliked the movie. I thought it was smug and self-interested and a little bit too clever for itself, for what it really was. And that kind of gets to where I kind of get with Tarantino. He's very good at walking the line between paying tribute to the films of his video store that he grew up in, basically. And the other side of the line, though, is if you step too far, you kind of are talking down to those movies, like, oh, those movies were what I love, but I'm going to make a good version of that. And that's really condescending. And I think he does sometimes trespass over that line. That said, I'd rather have a dozen Tarantinos out there feeding their own obsessions than a dozen corporate filmmakers, McGee's, making like whatever the studio notes tell them to make.
What was that really bad McGee movie that came out not too long ago?
It's called All of Them.
No, maybe I'm not the one I'm thinking of. I'm going to find out because it's like, oh, it was The Babysitter. That's right. And The Babysitter too. That's right. And I just realized the joke you were making. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Took me a while. Honestly, I mean, the Babysitter movies are fine. I like the second one better, but that's also the case with fucking Charlie's Angels. The second one's better. Yes,
I can't remember a thing about the Charlie's Angels movie. I saw the first two. I didn't see that reboot. Was there a third one with the original cast? I don't know.
There was a reboot that Kristen Stewart and somebody else in it, and I can't remember who. I
That
think
seems
Elizabeth
that
Banks.
seems like a thing that happened, but I obviously didn't see that.
No.
Yeah, I don't know. People are talking about From Dusk Till Dawn. First off, it's not really a Tarantino film, but that movie always like I get why people love it. To me, that movie runs out of steam the moment the vampires are introduced, and it's not because of the change in genre. That's fine. There's been movies that have done that before and since that have done it really well too. It's that it goes from a movie that's kind of a crazy variation on kind of a natural born killers kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
to a cartoon. And I don't know. I don't love this silly. I don't like horror comedies, and it becomes a horror comedy. It goes from being like a weird psychedelic crime movie to a cartoon, and I want that hard edged crime film from the beginning back. And so, to me, the first half of the film is pretty good. The second half is pretty bad, and I know everyone loves the second half, and they love all the dumb like silly stuff at the end. And I feel I'm glad you guys got that movie. It's just it doesn't really work for me.
I've never seen From Dusk Till Dawn. I think part of the problem is like when those movies first came out, I didn't see either. I didn't see it, but then I think that was the same year the Bordello of Blood came out, and I was constantly getting them confused. So I was like,
Yeah, I like that movie way more.
I don't prefer it to Demon Knight. Demon Knight is fucking great, but Bordello of Blood was just.
So here's the thing, Demon Knight doesn't feel at all like EC Comics. That's I guess
Yeah.
my big problem with it. If it's really great as an action horror film, and I mean that it's like legitimately a great action horror film that could fit right into the Prophecy series, by the way.
Oh, I can see that.
Right, but it doesn't have any relationship back to EC Comics, which is
Mm-mm.
Tales from the Crypt's whole thing, right? There's nothing ironic or like strangely moralistic about it. Whereas Bordello of Blood actually fits that mold pretty well for long form. And plus, you get just Dennis Miller in his prime in a ridiculous situation, well aware he's making a ridiculous film. And I think that's pretty great. I haven't watched it in many years though, so it's very possible that my opinion would change if I actually sat down and watched it. But for right now, I would say that I kind of might be on the weird side of the coin there and prefer Bordello of Blood.
Well, I mean, I can't rake you over the coals for many reasons, but obviously, like for me, like Bordello of Blood didn't resonate because I didn't read the EC comics or Tales from the Crypt. So that part, it's lost on me.
Well, Jake is pointing out that neither of them feel like EC Comics. What I think I'm talking about is the look of that film looks like a fucking comic book. Whereas Demon Knight does not. Demon Knight looks like a stylized horror movie. Whereas, to me, the look of Bordello of Blood looks shockingly like it was pulled out of an adult comic book. Probably the wrong type of comic book, but it looks like it was pulled out of a comic book.
Who was the dude that did Fritz the Cat?
Oh yeah. Can't come up with the name at the moment, but you're right. That's exactly what I'm thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking. I think that it's funny because that was that period also where like alternative rock was big and the soundtracks were really important to those movies. So Demon Knight also benefits from having that soundtrack. So I think there was a time when that really helped. I think you take the rock songs out of The Crow, for instance, and that film has a lot less fans. I really do. Certainly the sequels, that's true of.
Again, haven't seen The Crow.
Oh, I haven't seen The Crow.
No, because I was a WWF gal, and I was like, "Oh, look, it's Sting from WCW. I don't like WCW." Yes, that was my train of thought when I was like 12.
I hear that attempt to reboot that again has finally died, perhaps for good.
Sting is still wrestling. Oh wait, you're talking about The Crow. Never mind.
What are the chances that I was talking about wrestling?
Survivor Series is tonight. You probably didn't know what I was talking about when I mentioned it, and that probably made you like you probably had to Google it, and that makes me happy that you had to put that into your search engine That's going to be in your search engine's history now.
Hey, Robert, how are you?
Hey, Robert.
And there we go. I think you might be missing an apostrophe somewhere in that word.
You'd think he'd know better English, being from England.
No. So it's funny because proper English actually has more slang words than American English does, which is fascinating because we think of it the opposite way. But the average person in the UK, as a general group, I know that Mike hates that term being used, but the average person actually doesn't speak like what we get on television here. It doesn't happen. Now you got them talking about wrestling, by the way. I'm gonna start like putting people in timeouts over this, I think.
Oh my god,
I would never do that. That's too close to censorship, and that's a red line for me. But Robert is fine and dandy.
Sweet.
I believe it. So I don't know what that means.
What is it? Is it related to that in the mystery movie trailer?
I don't know. We still haven't got back to that, I think.
Is it Skinamarink? I saw that trending earlier.
What is Skinamarink?
I don't know. All I was thinking when I saw that, though, I was like, is that Sharon Lois and Graham with the elephant? Skinamarinky dinky dink, Nobody knows what I'm talking about.
No. You made that up.
I did not. I went to one of their live shows when I was really little. There was a big elephant, and they would sing children's songs. It was like a better version of Sherry Lewis, except she was not a puppet.
When I was a kid, there was something called the Magic Garden. There was these two hippie women who would just sing songs and get real high every episode. Then at the end, they pull out a mirror and they claim they saw all the people watching the show in the mirror, and they'd call out their names. And they spent like 2 minutes an episode being like, "And I see Bobby, and I see."
I remember that show.
They never fucking once said my name. It was the beginning of me hating hippies, I think.
Did you ever have that problem, like finding like the personalized things?
I never found one. Are you kidding?
There was always like, it's like that old Simpsons joke. There was always like a Larn, but never a Lorne.
They would go on class trips and of course the gift shops of wherever you went. You know, there'd be that spinner with like whatever, like I don't know, key, key tag or whatever, and it'd spin to the L's, and it was like, yeah, lost cause every time. Don't feel too bad for me, people. People are, I love your name all the time, and I'm like, you wouldn't if you had it. It doesn't work like that. Someone knows. Look at this.
Oh,
his nose.
Okay.
Steven knows.
Sweet. Steven Piz.
It's not actually Romper Room. It was the Magic Garden. Although that maybe Lauren is talking about that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I just Googled the Magic Garden. That sounds legit, but it sounds like the part with the mirror does sound Romper Room-esque.
Well, it was definitely the hippie girls that did the mirror thing at the end of every show.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it was a thing that they both did.
Maybe. All I know is I never got the shout out. And at a young and impressionable age, that made me turn right to Sid and Marty Krofft and away from the Magic Garden, because Sid and Marty Krofft, there was always a chance that the dinosaurs would eat those motherfuckers. So they chase into that same cave every night, every episode. I just wanted Marshall, Will, or Holly to get eaten, or their little friend, the little miniature Slee Stack. What was it? It was a little caveman thing. What was that thing called? On Land of the Lost, remember? I don't know. Slee Stacks were pretty cool though, because they had that scary sound that went with them.
Let me see. What was it? Land of the Lost. What was the caveman?
There was a little caveman like sidekick character on Land of the Lost.
Jesus, that thing's horrifying. Its name is Chaka.
Chaka. Yeah.
Wow.
Chaka was awful. I wanted everyone to get eaten by dinosaurs though.
I want to know what happened to that poor child actor that had to play him now.
Well, it was probably a little person. They probably drank themselves to death. But I mean, did you ever have any experience with Sid and Marty Krofft Super Show?
I watched some of the Was the Super Show, was HR Puffin stuff its own thing, or was it part of the Super
It
Show?
was its own thing, but it became part of the Super Show, which was true of like most of the big ones. My favorite was the Bugaloos, which was completely psychedelic nonsense about kids that were in a band that had bug wings and could fly around. But you know, they had their villain who would go after them, and it was just nonsense. But it was completely a show to introduce drugs to children.
Yeah, I mean the okay, so this is good. Like I remember back in, this is probably when I was early teens. This is like early mid 90s or so. And I was still watching like a ton of Nick at Night, like watching all the old sitcoms. Those are my jams. And I think at some point they started running the HR Puffin stuff things, and I had to, like, I was fighting to stay up late on the weekends to watch HR Puffin stuff.
HR Puffenstock, Sigmund the Sea Monster, the Far Out Space Nuts, which was the show in which Gilligan accidentally launched himself into space.
Can you imagine if you did that on purpose, though? I mean,
Well, the whole joke is that they want to go have lunch, and he pushes a button that says launch. That's how the show started. You see, kids' entertainment used to be simple, but it was like so absurdist that like kids could actually understand. Like now, it's like all like Japanese anime inspired, whatever. I think they're flashing and like giant robots are fighting.
oh my god, it's not even
girls in cool
anime.
girl skirts and shit. I don't get what's
It's
going.
not even anime inspired. It's just anime. Like anime is so mainstream these days. Kids don't understand how hard it was to find anime that, like, besides Blockbuster. You know, you'd have some Sailor Moon, you'd have a little bit of Fushigi Yugi, maybe some Utena, and then it was like all these really obscure titles for the most part, except for a couple of classics like Ninja Scroll. Have you seen Ninja Scroll?
No,
Okay, chat. I need you to troll Lauren and make him see Ninja Scroll.
why would you do that?
Everybody who, you know, if you've seen any anime, you have to. It's like a rite of passage. I'm sorry. But you know, and then it was like a bunch of obscure stuff. So it's like the only place nearby that had anime was like this mall that was across town at a Suncoast.
Mhm.
And it was $30 in the 90s for a VHS that had 2 or 3 episodes. Times were tough, children. We didn't have your BitTorrents or your LimeWires or your Kazas. Not quite yet. We got that later. But dude, it was rough. Y'all don't know. And good luck finding any manga. You're gonna have some Sailor Moon, but it's about it.
You couldn't just go to the Barnes and Noble and where they actually put chairs near the manga section so that the kids that don't buy it can read it.
We didn't have that quite that. We didn't quite have it back then. It took a few years for us to get like some really solid manga collections in Barnes and Noble. I'm having flashbacks so bad.
I remember
VHS tapes. $30 for a VHS tape.
I probably have a VHS tape within reach. It says something about me. Although I'm trying to I have a video on the channel if anyone wants to check this out. But I like to collect dead formats for home video, and I've been trying to chase down because I obviously don't have a way to play this, so it's kind of stupid to own. But many of the formats I have, that's true of. I want a DVHS tape. Do you know what that was? So that was 1080i video on VHS tape. That's the thing that existed. High def VHS.
Okay, when was this a thing?
Like 98, I think.
Okay.
There's only like like 15 titles that came out on the format. But so the whole thing is no one has the ability to play them anymore, basically. And the tapes are starting to degrade because they're all like hitting the 25-year mark, which is when tapes start to go to shit. But I desperately want one. But there's like they're basically just like the very most mainstream titles possible, and that doesn't really work for me either. So that's a big thing. So if anyone out there has any DVHS that you want us to part with, like, get with me, because I definitely need one for the collection to go right alongside my CCAM VHS.
What's a CCAM?
CCAM was it's a VHS format. It's a broadcast standard actually, but it has the fewest frames per second of any standardized format. So it's the worst quality out there. But it was used in a lot of Southern Asian nations, and I think Australia used it, and then they got the hell out and got to PAL. But it's a fascinating format. Anyway, we don't need to
one
talk
more question. Sorry, I like compared to DVHS. When was CCAM? Was that concurrent with it or before that?
CCAM is way before that. CCAM, I mean, it was a broadcast standard in parts of the world. So when VHS and Beta came out, there was CCAM of both, and they were, you know, they were shit quality. But I can remember in the tape trading days having there were certain movies that were only available off of CCAM, and you could always tell because by the end of the movie the audio was hopelessly out of sync because there weren't enough frames when we converted it. Yeah, it was always awful. And the quality was shit, but that was kind of normal for the tape trading days for the rare films.
Oof.
Yeah,
interesting.
We did have a question back here for that, and that I scrolled right past. There we go, from Griff. Thoughts on Del Toro's The Devil's Backbone?
I haven't seen it in. Wait, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah, it's still okay.
It's the Drowned Kid.
I think I was talking to Griffin about Devil's Backbone a while back, and I always forget.
I like that. To me, that's a course correction film for him because I'm not the biggest Kronos fan. I'm definitely not the big Blade 2 fan. But Devil's Backbone is like pretty great. I do think The Orphanage, which is not his, but he produced it. He was one of the producers on it. Is a better film, and because they're very similar, but I think Orphanage is just superior to my mind.
Yeah, I keep getting that confused with The Orphanage forever.
They are very similar films, but I think The Orphanage just is superior in every way. I do love the bomb, the unexploded ordnance bomb in Devil's Backbone. I think that's a great literary device to put in a film. I think it's really cool. But
also, if anybody wants to revisit that, that's nice.
But you know what? I'm talking about Guillermo del Toro. I just watched the first episode of The Cabinet of Curiosities.
Oh yeah, how was it?
So it was it's all over the place, but it's more good than bad. I think there was some shortcuts taken with the character. It's based on a Guillermo del Toro short story, which is already a little weird because most of that series is like classic weird era fiction adaptations. So you have Kuttner and you have Lovecraft, so it's a little bit weird to have like the producer's story lead it. But just like, you know, the idea of what a redneck American like grifter would be is a little broad, and it's a little bit like cliche to me. Always listening to conservative talk radio where they're being openly racist on the air. It's like, yeah, that's there's very little nuance there.
It shouldn't be talk radio. He should be watching YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
You've got to update it. You've got to update
on
it.
Reddit.
22. I know we all still listen to some radio in our cars, but still.
But
you gotta like technologically move forward.
But I mean, the story itself I liked a lot. And then we got to the end, and we got to what I consider to be Del Toro's like and he didn't direct the episode, but his prodigy did. It gets the problem, I think, with most of his films, which is that he has to watch the overuse of CGI in his climax of his films because they almost get to be like Marvel DC, whereas no matter what goodwill they've built up, they're going to destroy it with a bunch of dumb, overly busy CGI at the end. Wonder Woman being a perfect example of that, right? A film that you go, wow, that battlefield scene in No Man's Land is awesome. And then you get to the end of the film and you're like, this sucks because there's a bunch of shit flying and lightning and crap and people are flying.
That was, yeah, man. Wonder Woman, so solid the first two acts. Fuck.
Yeah, it's a shit. And that movie has a perfect place to end, by the way. Like, we're talking about Wonder Woman.
Just
When
like genre, guys.
there's that speech like between Chris Pine and Wonder Woman, and he basically says, "Look, it's not real, it's not real," and she kinda and then she's becoming like really she's being illogical. She really is. She's like, no, it definitely has to be, and you feel her being desperate to believe it's real. Kind of where the movie should end.
Yeah.
Because like everything after that kind of sucks. And up
Oh
to
yeah.
that point, it might have been the best superhero movie ever made up to that point, but then it completely destroys any chances of that with that third act.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the issue, like, bring back to Del Toro. I mean, I saw Crimson Peak not that long ago. Well, probably last year or the beginning of this year. I forget which. And the CG kind of really just was just very too much. Everything felt so atmospheric, and then that CG really took me out of it with the ghosts.
Yep.
I mean, but it's like it is a very lovely gothic movie, though. It's very pretty.
Ghosts are so easy to do right. You
Yeah.
just put people in fucking makeup and underexpose them on the film. You don't have to do CGI. You just don't.
Yeah. Nobody wants that.
Robert has a comment about Wonder Woman.
This is true. Wonder Woman is foxy.
I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
And Midnight Geek says Pikmin's Model episode 5 on Cabinet was the best Lovecraft adaptation I've ever seen. Amazingly done. I am very much anticipating that. The second episode is the Henry Kuttner adaptation of The Graveyard Rats, which is one of my very favorite short stories. I actually read it on this channel. You can find that video too, because it is in the public domain. So there's a lot I'm looking forward to, especially the classic weird horror era adaptations. Pikmin's Model was actually already adapted for Night Gallery. I don't know if you've ever seen that, and that's a pretty good adaptation. There's two adaptations of Lovecraft that were on Night Gallery. There was Pikmin's Model, and they did Cool Air. And I think both those are pretty damn good episodes. Certainly the Night Gallery adaptation of Cool Air is better than the one that was in the Necronomicon movie, which I thought was pretty shaky.
Did not see Night Gallery. I am aware of it. And we also had like a random like art gallery called Night Gallery when I was in high school. So that's my extent of its knowledge.
Well, the good thing is right now, because those Blu-ray sets came out of Night Gallery, there's a lot of like DVD box sets on eBay real cheap if you want them.
Oh.
Which is honestly, it's 70s television. I say go for the DVDs.
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh damn, those are hella cheap. Even like the whole complete one, like new, is like $27 on Amazon.
You cannot beat that because everyone's
$20 on Walmart, brand new.
Because yeah, I mean that's and there's some just amazing episodes. Like the first 2 seasons of the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone, are so amazing, but like no one wants to admit this, but the later stuff is not as good. Night Gallery is better than the later seasons of Twilight Zone. Of course, Darkroom is better than both of them in many ways, but we'll never get that on physical media, apparently. Whatever. But I love seeing Cabinet of Curiosities out there and doing something, because after Creepshow, which I thought the first season of Creepshow was amazing. Second, not as much. I didn't see the third. But I'm glad to see someone else giving it a try, because I think we should always have a horror anthology television series going.
Oh, absolutely. What was the what was that stupid little goblin thing in that first season of Creepshow? What the hell was that?
The finger based on the David J. Shaw story?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm thinking of now. This is great. I have no idea what you're doing.
The guy finds a finger and he brings it home and it grows into the creature, and then
oh yes. Sorry.
Yeah. That's a great short story, and it's a great adaptation. It's good stuff.
Yeah,
I love David J. Shaw. Cool. I mean, that is a dude who's gotten screwed over by 2 major horror franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. but is this a body of like fiction that's just unmatched in the short form? Except maybe Dennis Etchison is probably a better short story writer of his era, but he's up there. He's like number 2 or 3 at the worst, and like Hollywood keeps fucking this man over. So stop it, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Dream Child, and he is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 as well as Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. They keep screwing him over. And if you read his screenplays for all of them, you're like, why didn't they make that as written? Whatever. There was a question. Jessica saying there's a great question from Orc. Try to figure out what that is. Oh. How much money would it take for you to do an audio edition of all your books? I cannot. I despite having a YouTube channel and talking way too much, I do not like my voice. So someone would have to do that.
Oh, but your voice is so relaxing.
I put you to sleep, don't I?
I didn't say that.
But you meant it.
You
I think the thing about audio books is that it has its audience, and it's very lucrative when it works, but it's very expensive to do right. When you talk about paying someone to read an entire novel, you're paying them a decent amount of money to do that work, and then the editing work, putting together, getting cross formats. It's actually pretty labor intensive for publishers, and publishers, generally speaking, are kind of like, they want to farm out that work, and again, that's another cost. So right now there isn't a plan on an audiobook version of Divide by Zero, the new book coming out soon. But listen, if the book sells well enough, anything's possible, right?
It could be like a Vocaloid program, like Hatsune Miku.
I don't know what that means.
That was worth it.
Yeah. Robert Long says, what it really need to do is make a good creep show movie. Well, they did that once. They made
they sure did.
They made one really good creep show movie. One film that we all kind of like, but is flawed as hell, and one film that we pretend doesn't exist. Because it was just people bought the rights to the name. I keep all my sex spots in my real life there, Mike.
Maybe he's wondering if like you could get sex bots to do the audible versions of your books. Like,
oh my god, that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe like, they have the little voice changers, so it's like you could swap them out for like, this one's Blue Eel, this one's Divide by Zero, this one's Snarl, right?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
So that's basically basically a Vocaloid, but in real life.
Jake is asking, speaking of 70s TV, have either of you seen BBC's A Ghost Story for Christmas series? They're great ghost story adaptations. They are mostly M.R. James adaptations. I own the box set. I bought it in Lexington a month ago, a little over a month ago now. I've seen the classic adaptation of Whistle and I'll Come to You, and I love that. That's like the best freaking like classic M.R. James adaptation. It's just aged incredibly well. I haven't seen most of the others. There's a few reading the descriptions that I may have. My plan is that there's going to be December viewing when I can get time, because good news is they're all fairly short, so I can actually, if I have like a half hour to put aside, 40 minutes to put aside, I can get one in. That box set does include like the more recent ones, which I don't know that I'm interested in. I kind of just want the classics. Sam, have you seen any of the Ghost Story for Christmas series?
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
So the BBC, for years in the 70s and even into the 80s, produced classic Ghost Story adaptations to then broadcast them late on Christmas Eve night.
That's cool.
And the reason they did it is because that was a traditional, very British tradition of telling ghost stories on the holiday. And even in some of the, Christmas carols that you sing, there'll be references to and ghost stories and tales of the long, long ago. So it's like, it's a tradition that America never really had, but it is particularly British. but it's a great thing. And M.R. James, if no one knows, if any of you don't know who M.R. James is, one of the architects of modern horror, and a titan, just a titan. That's one of the many reasons that I get annoyed about the kind of Stephen King, H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe thing, is because we think that horror began with those guys.
Honestly, I'm just enjoying Stephen King's like current Twitter beef with Elon Musk. You know, he's just like not even bothering to give Elon Musk the time of day, and it's kind of hilarious. But it's like when two people you don't like fight. How do you pick a side?
Exactly. That may be the answer right there.
I agree. I saw that.
Audiobooks, I'll make it happen.
Like, please, just a page, just a page. I'll just take that if I can. If that's all I can get, I'll take a page. But it has to be like a dialogue heavy page because I want to hear Orc do the different voices.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I almost want to write something just for him to do. Big Crack Rock says, I've already made and have been selling tons of Lauren's audiobooks on the Chinese market.
Oh, man.
So you're the Alibaba. You know, it's funny about that. You know, I'm small potatoes, definitely in the horror lits community, but it always amazed me when those torrents would be out there and they'd be like, oh, 50 zombie novels, and Lifeless was in there, and I'd be like, Jesus Christ, I know I've made it when they're pirating my work.
Exactly. That's a high compliment.
Orc's audiobook readings would be dank. I think we all agree.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Pope Pepsmear asks, what's your favorite TSOL album? It's a little unfair. Again, you're not going to like my answer. So of the studio albums, Dance With Me. I mean, it's all the classics. It's kind of the greatest hits record by itself. Although, you know, Thoughts of Yesterday, the compilation of all the early singles is pretty great too. No question about it. I like the Jack Grissom era more than I like the Wood era or anything after. But I will say my favorite TSOL album, period, is the Live in 91 reunion album. Because that way you get Weathered Statues and you get all the great era, all the classic lineup stuff all in one place. And that is an incredible live performance. It's better than their studio tracks, in my humble opinion. Sam, do you know who TSOL are?
I'm True Sounds of Liberty, True Sons of Liberty.
Sounds, yeah, True Sounds of Liberty.
Okay, close enough.
Or Lost Backwards.
Yes, that as well. No, have not listened to any of their music.
Have you seen a movie called The Return of the Living Dead?
I have not seen Return of the Living Dead.
Okay. You just have some homework. Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, then the Flowers by the Doors and briefly in Return of the Living Dead. That's how a lot of people know them. As well as 45 Grave, you know, that's what people, generally speaking, that move from.
Oh. Well, I have to bounce out of here for Survivor Series. So.
I'm sure the rest of the chat will as well when you go.
I you know, I don't have time for the pre-show, but I want to see the main card. But it was all very nice hanging out with you guys tonight. Very fun. And I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving, good Black Friday. Don't stress about the holidays. Just enjoy them for what they are. But I'll see you guys next time, okay?
Thank you so much, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Y'all have a nice evening.
And now I'm big, which is not good. Griff is asking, will there ever be a box set of your books? See, that's a tough one. So my books are kind of all over the place as far as publishers. So it's difficult to do. Maybe someday when they're all out of print and they're all back home with me, I could make that happen. But right now that's not a possibility. I kind of would love the idea of a box set of the Perihelion cycle when it's complete. Divide by Zero is the third of that series. So, which began with Blue Eel and followed with Bleak December. So, let's see, what else do we have here? What motivated you to become a writer, and do you have any thought on your next book? I have a lot of thoughts on my next book because so Divide by Zero will come out next month, and then the book after that is titled Cenotaph, and it's already been written. So yeah, I have plenty of thoughts on that book because it already exists. It's a shorter novel than Divide by Zero. It's also a first-person narrative, which is something I've never done before. I think it's a cool. It's kind of, if Divide by Zero is influenced by, again, the weird fiction of the time of the 30s, the 20s and 30s, this is Cenotaph is much more like a turn of the century ghost story in a way, but it's modern. It's told very modern. The language isn't restrictive at all, but it's part of the Perihelion cycle as well. And then after that, the thing I'm working on is called Citadel, and it's sort of a direct sequel to Divide by Zero in a way. So yeah, my dance card's pretty full about my writing. At some point, I'd like to get right back to writing some short stories as well, because I haven't done it in years really, and I was pretty successful at that. I sold a lot of stories to a lot of markets, and I wouldn't mind at all getting back to that for a while between one of these books. M.R. James was not a pulp writer. M.R. James was he was a Bible historian who liked to write ghost stories as well on the side. I wouldn't consider him a pulp writer at all. The idea of a literary fiction is a fairly recent phenomenon, but he probably would be better served by that definition than pulp. Good night, Mike. I think you probably already abandoned us by the time I got to your message, but I hope you have good dreams in smoggy old England. I think I'm caught up. I am caught up. Well, no, I'm not. It's just the chat is moving again. StreamYard seems to be a little funky tonight. I have not seen Beasts. Nigel Keel is definitely someone who I have great respect for. Quatermass is amazing. But I have to admit, I do have some serious gaps in my in my viewing of English horror that I need to fill still. Robert says, I have to see you next year in Kentucky. I'd love to go. Well, you're definitely invited. I don't know that we're doing it in Kentucky next year, or if we're going elsewhere. There hasn't really been any discussions yet. We need to figure that all out. I'm definitely down for getting together with the guys and hopefully girls next year. But at this point, I don't know where that'd be. But there's also some opportunity, perhaps, for smaller get-togethers. Let's just say that. It's an idea that I think I want to talk to a few people about, but we're all over the country, and there's no reason why people that aren't within like an hour and a half, 2 hours reach of each other can't start to get together. I mean, and I think that would be a good thing to facilitate. This community is getting large enough that I think it should be a good idea for people to get together. What's my favorite found footage movie? Ben, depending how you're defining found footage, it's funny. I am a big Blair Witch fan. I do love Cannibal Holocaust, which is half found footage, right? I'm not a big fan of the endless cycle of like drop the camera, what I call drop the camcorder movies, whereas like they feel improvised because they're so found footage. I'm not a fan of Cloverfield, really. It's fine. I watched it once. I'm good. I'll never go back to it. I think the idea of a kaiju film shot in that style is a lot more appealing than the film that I watched in theaters. I can't say I'm hungry for more found footage just to have found footage. I would say I do like Rec a lot as well. The original Rec is pretty phenomenal. Yeah. All right. So Jake asks, my favorite aspect of House with Laughing Windows. What makes it exceptional? Okay, so House with Laughing Windows is my favorite giallo. It's low on my list of top 25 films of all time, but it's on the list of my favorite top 25 films of all time. House of Laughing Windows, what it does that other giallos do not do is it strips away the artifice. And what I mean by that is that there's certain aspects that you have to have for giallos. There's a certain blending of feelings of great art and at the same time gutter pornography that any good giallo does really well. And that's that whole idea of like literary kind of violence and smut, which is what the giallos came out of post World War II. These books were published for working classes, generally speaking, men who wanted very violent, very sexual fiction. Got to remember, television was off in most of Europe for the post-war years, and people didn't have money. So a very cheap paperback that gave them their entertainment value for working class men was where the giallo really came from. But when you get to like Argento and even Bava before that, the problem with their films is that they are safe. They still feel like commercial films. They feel like something that could someday be broadcast on television, just with the gore scenes cut or whatever, or the nudity blurred. House with Laughing Windows does not feel like that. House with Laughing Windows feels like a forbidden film, like something we should not be watching. You don't feel gross for having watched it. It's not like a Cannibal Holocaust thing, where it's like you honestly feel like part of your morality died with the movie. But you do feel like you've watched something that you could not introduce to just anyone else. It's a very specific audience that'll appreciate that film, but those who do will, I think, be reminded what cinema is capable of, which to me, I've repeated this a million times, you guys have heard this, but I want to watch movies that make me feel things that I can't feel any other way. Not just safely feel these things. I mean, you can't feel them any other way. And House with Laughing Windows is kind of like one of Argento's Animal trilogy without the stylistic approach that Argento put in place that makes them hugely entertaining, but it also dulls the senses a little bit. I hope that answers your question, and I hope that all made sense to you. And I'm glad that you've seen the film, because I don't think enough people have. Let's see. The mockumentary of Mungo Lake. I like Mungo Lake. I mean, honestly, if it didn't have its last 10 minutes, I don't think any of us would be talking about that movie, but I do like that movie quite a lot. Jake follows it up with saying, I'm not sure if Laughing Windows is my favorite giallo, but it's my favorite rural giallo for sure, edging out even Don't Torture a Duckling. Yeah, I mean, Don't Torture a Duckling has a lot of that flair, but it also has Fulci's trademark anger. And that's the thing that we don't talk about with Fulci, is that his films all feel angry. You can feel the rage of a director who's unhappy with his life. You could feel a distinct storytelling presence. I think that's why Fulci is so synonymous with like punk rock and heavy metal and death metal, and it's because like all those feelings that led you to like that kind of music will lead you to Fulci eventually, because he has that same angry swagger, that defiant stance. And Duckling, of course, is a diatribe against the Catholic Church that is masquerading as a horror film or as a giallo. an incredible artist, and we still haven't really gotten to the point where we're appreciating Fulci's contribution to the genre, I think. Stephen Trower's book is a good start, though. If you haven't read his book on love on Lucio Fulci, please search it out. It's pretty amazing. I'm sorry, Robert, that you live in a shitty ass apartment right now. Maybe we should go fund you out of that. What's the best punk rock song? Easy. There ain't no Sanity Claus by the Damned. And now Pope Papsmear says Fulci is truly the Antonia of splatter. Yeah. I don't want to make this a Fulci stream, but I will say this: like, when you look at when the chips were down for Fulci and he had no money to make the films and he kept making horror films, he had a period after when the money started to fade away, he started making them for television in Italy. And then when the television market dried up, he continued to make them on a very limited release availability. But he just never completely gave up. Even as he was dying, he was developing the wax mask with Salvador and Dario Argento. He was attached at one very brief point with the Two Evil Eyes when it was just called Evil Eyes, which I still think is a better title than Two Evil Eyes anyway. But he was a guy who had made films in all kinds of genres, but when he found where he belonged, and that was with Zombie and City of the Living Dead and House by the Cemetery, those few years where he just found his voice finally. It's not saying that his earlier work, you can't see all of his style and all of his passion, but sometimes there's a specific moment when an artist finds what they should have been doing their entire career, or what they should be doing at that moment is crystallized. And that's that early 80s, late 70s Lucio Fulci era, whereas I think he was a more powerful filmmaker than Dario Argento ever was, because Dario is much more of a stylist, a fantasist, whereas Fulci is pure emotion. It's pure atmosphere and anger. The PIL song "Anger is an Energy," right? That's probably the best way to view his work. That's not meant to bash Argento either, but I love classic Argento, and I loved Black Glasses this year. But to me, damn, man, Fulci was just a guy who put it on screen. He put his head, his heart, and everything up his sleeve on screen. And he's much more of my type of storyteller, which is ironic because he's like, he's not a narrative guy, and I tend to be, but whatever. Pope Papsmear says Devil's Honey and Touch of Death are my favorites from Fulci. I just picked up Touch of Death. I've had like bootlegs and bad transfers and VHS copies of it, but I finally picked up a Blu-ray of it. It's rough around the edges, definitely, but I think it may be the last time Fulci had enough to really do what he wanted to do. You could argue that it's not, it's not City of the Living Dead or House by the Cemetery. It definitely isn't. It doesn't have that kind of depth to it, but I think it's strong for what it is, as a kind of late 80s splatter, a pure splatter flick, like an like a H.G. Lewis type thing. Yeah, I think it's pretty goddamn strong. Devil's Honey is a weird one. You can see that he was trying to make that kind of softcore sex thriller, but he that wasn't in his DNA. He had to make it. It's still a Fulci film through and through. I think it's a great film the first time you watch it. I don't revisit it often. I'd argue that Cat of Nine Tails is more conspiracy giallo than straight slasher too. Well, giallos are not synonymous with slasher. Um, the Girl Who Knew Too Much is a great example. It's a giallo. It's not a slasher at all. What Have They Done to Your Daughters? Not a slasher. It has some hatchet attacks in the movie, but that film is not. It's not a slasher. Really, like giallo were crime novels, and that does cross over into the slashery stuff, definitely. But I think that Argento kind of made people think that giallos were just one thing. And listen, when you succeed so wildly that you redefine a genre to your, your tastes, that's pretty wildly successful. You can't blame them for it. But there are some real great giallos that are not just guys in black gloves with straight razors. Jake asks, why is Day of the Dead referred to as the darkest of the Dead trilogy when Night of the Living Dead is clearly the bleakest? Is because the 80s has gotten so soft. It's because it's the goriest. I agree with you. I think Night of the Living Dead is definitely the darkest of them. I think the idea is that, like, Day, just the tipping point has happened, and the world's not going to go back to normal, that this is the apocalypse for sure. Because in Night and Dawn, you kind of get the feeling that humanity might still get their arms around it. And even in Land of the Dead, it doesn't feel as bleak as Day. But you see, this, you're getting me in trouble too, Jake, here, because this is going to inevitably lead to me to talk about why Dawn doesn't resonate with me. And it's like, it's a sacred cow. You can't talk bad about Dawn. And I like the movie. I just don't love it. And I don't think it's as important as people claim it is. I think Night of the Living Dead is obviously a cornerstone film that changed the genre, right? And Day of the Dead, I think, is an interesting counterbalance to what was happening at that time in the 80s. Now in the 80s, in 85, you're already seeing like the rise of the Nightmare on Elm Street thing, whereas the kind of big fantasy, jokier aspects of the genre coming to the forefront. And Day of the Dead is kind of a film that rejects all that. And it kind of goes for the jugular. You have these big performances and these wild characters, which I'd argue all of Romero's films have. But it's very much a film that Day of the Dead is very much a film that doesn't have the depth of Dawn or Night, but it writes really well within the box it does have. So it's not depthy. Oh, military is bad. Scientists miss the point of life. Okay, I get it. These are not deep concepts. These are not big ideas, right? But inside that box, when they decided to tell that story, like, Romero crafted something really beautiful and really, really well done. It's also one of those situations where it's like the big rubbery special effects that invaded, the 80s horror thing doesn't look like it was added to sell tickets. It looks like it's part of that story. The Grand Guignol is appropriate for Day of the Dead. So I think Day is an important movie in that respect. But Night of the Living Dead is my favorite of the trilogy, and that's not going to change. I'm not going to suddenly get whatever all you guys get out of Dawn of the Dead, and I'm not going to overstate Day of the Dead and make it more important than Night. It's just not. Night is as important as a horror film gets. So Robert Long says Phantasm 2. It's my favorite of the Phantasm movies. That's a series that benefits from going commercial. It still gets to be weird and funky and strange and do all kinds of things that you're not supposed to do in a respectable studio film. But yet it looks great. I love the original film, but the original film has not aged as well as 2 has. Top 5 movies of all time. I feel like I've run through this list a few times, but Big T, I'd be happy to do it again. So my favorite film of all time is Bride of Frankenstein. My second favorite film is Natural Born Killers. My third favorite film is Heathers. And I want to stop there for just a second because I want to point out that those 3 films are all have more in common than you might suspect, and that commonality is not simply that they're my favorite 3 films of all time, but they all have a certain pathology about social isolation, and I think they're really beautiful films for exploring that territory. So my number 4 and number 5 are gonna probably be no surprise to anyone, but they're very different than the top 3. My number 4 film of all time is Hellfest. A film that I just it feels more like Halloween the season than any other film to me of all time. I love Halloween season. Not so much the day, the whole season, and that movie just was a revelation to me. And it's also the most recent film on my top 25 list. Number 5 is the original Friday 13th, which atmosphere out the ass. I think it looks and feels incredibly authentic to me. It has an authenticity that even Halloween feels stagey. Friday 13th never feels stagey to me. And I think that's why I love it the most. And I think it's way better than any of the sequels. I'll just run through I'll do the top 15 because I did pull up the file. Number 6 is Phantom of the Paradise, my favorite Brian De Palma film. Number 7 is Game Over, the great Ashwin Saravan film from 2019. I guess that's the most recent on the list, actually. Great. Taapsee Pannu's performance anchors that film in. It should be on everyone's top 10 list, in my opinion. Number 8 is Alien, the original, of course. Number 9 is Ringu. Number 10 is Black Sunday. Number 11 is Hereditary. Number 12 is The Haunting of Julia, which still needs a decent digital release. Number 13 is Friday the 13th Final Chapter. Number 14 is Cat People. And number 15 is The Exorcist 3. And I know I probably pissed someone off that I like The Exorcist 3 more than the original, but it is based on one of my very favorite novels, Legion. So I hope that helps. Jake says, I mostly agree that Argento was a stylist, but he's tapped into something different with Stendhal syndrome. He puts it all out there with that one. It's the last time he had anything to say. I love Stendhal syndrome. Got to see it at its New York premiere when it had its limited release. And yeah, I think it's a film that unjustly gets lumped into all the stuff that came after it, which is less than successful. The thing is, you feel he's going after some big fish. So with his message and his themes and Stendhal. He's also kind of self-criticizing in that film. So in that way, it's kind of the anti-opera because opera feels very self-congratulatory. And don't get me wrong, that works for that movie. But Stendhal almost is kind of like an examination of himself as an artist. And the best use of his daughter in any of his films. Do I wish the CGI bullet looked better? Yeah. But besides that, I think it's a great film. It's the last great Argento film. Jake says, what have they done to your daughters? And Short Night of Glass Dolls are my favorite conspiracy giallos. I love both those movies. I'm in the minority, but clearly you're in it with me. I like What Have They Done to Solange a lot, but I love What Have They Done to Your Daughters. Then the Short Night of Glass Dolls is a lot of fun. That out of print Twilight, well, I guess the company's gone, so of course it's out of print, but that Twilight Time Blu-ray is pretty great. So it's good to see that movie get some love. And of course, All the Colors of the Night, the Sergio Martino's finest hour. Um, I love that movie. I love all the psychedelic satanic ritual sequences. I love the dream reality. I love the time loop in the middle of the movie, which that Nightmare on Elm Street film, I'm not sure if it's the fourth or fifth film. I think it's the fourth one, ripped off verbatim. Yeah, I'm a huge Martino guy though, so that shouldn't surprise you. Jeff asks, what are your thoughts on Paul Naschy? I don't think Dan's out there anymore. Dan is the biggest Paul Naschy fan you're ever going to meet, so you should actually address this question to him. Paul Naschy, I'm sorry, my leg is cramping up because I'm stupid enough to be sitting on it. Paul Naschy is one of those guys that was the real deal. He's obviously a guy who grew up loving monster movies of the previous generation and set about making them. And they really are monster movies. They may be the last legitimate pure monster movies ever made. Because something like, Monster Squad, it's nostalgia bait, and that's not what's going on with Paul Naschy and his werewolf movies and his vampire movies. And he made a fake Giallo. He was the real deal, definitely. I'm not sure if I could. It's not going to be for everyone, right? They're cheeky, they're simple, they're not always competently made. I'm sorry, Dan, if you watch this back, I'm sorry to say, but what they do have is they have a ton of heart, and the heart is in the right place, and that's rare. So let's go down here. Romero's best for me are Martin and Knight Riders. Night of the Living Dead is definitely my favorite Romero. I like Knight Riders, and I'm Martin. I'm mixed on. I always like the idea of Martin more than the movie when I watch it. To be honest with you, it's not a popular opinion, but I think Monkey Shines actually kind of gets shit on. It kind of has more going on than we give it credit for. To me, Romero, the slide starts really with Dark Half. That's the film that I look at and go, wow, it's not the best source material, but it's stronger than what you made. Jessica is saying, yes, Game Over is amazing, as any sane person would put it. You couldn't have put it best. It looks like your yes needs a few more S's, though, lady. Lauren is beginning to let the winter look take shape. So this is less than a week of not shaving. So there you go. Cliff Booth says, Haunting of Julia is on YouTube if anyone wants to check it out. It is on YouTube if anyone wants to check it out. In fact, there's a widescreen version on YouTube. It's an absolute drop-dead classic horror film. It is the scariest film ever made, in my opinion. It resonates in all the ways. I love Peter Straub's novel. We lost Peter Straub this year, by the way, people. So keep that in your heart and mind. But if I have a Golden Goose Blu-ray left, it's Haunting of Julia. We need that movie to get the kind of special edition love that will get a lot of people's eyes on it. I don't care about the artifact that much, but I want more people to enjoy it. It's not something I want to keep to myself. Jake, oh, why is it not coming up? Weird. Jake says, Cat People and Black Thunder are my top 5 horror films. Haunting of Julia, full six, top 15. Well, we tend to overlap a lot, my man. I don't like just one kind of horror. I like a lot of different types of horror. But I do find that I'm always compelled to things that go the full bore in what they want to do. And Cat People and Black Sunday are 2 examples of directors who just latched on to exactly what they wanted to do, knew it inside and out, and just went for it. And I think that's really important. Haunting of Julia, again, I do. And if any of you want to watch something genuinely scary, genuinely disturbing, Haunting of Julia is the place to go. It's my favorite Mia Farrow performance by far. I mean, she does a realistic take on grief in that movie that is heartbreaking and haunting. It's amazing. Dan answers that Paul Naschy is an icon and everyone should dive into his filmography. I agree. And while you're at that, Coffin Joe is another world horror icon that I think not enough people have checked it out. Jake says the only Naschy I've seen is Werewolf versus Vampire Woman. There are definite vampire women and werewolf in it. Yes, there are. See, this is where I get in trouble. I'm not a Polanski fan. I know, right? But like, I mean, Rosemary's Baby is a film that is like ungodly boring to me. It's like the Dawn of the Dead problem. Like, I can't do it. I just can't. I'm bored. I don't like those people. I don't want to watch their lives. I don't even care. Their sex scene is boring. I mean, and what bothers me too is like if you compare it with Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, which is a film that's very, very, very analogous to, because again, it's about a couple dealing with challenges in a modern marriage. Let's just say that. God, the Rogue film is so much better. Like, so yeah, I'm not a huge Polanski fan at all. I don't know what I could point to as something I think is better than average. Sorry, I know I'm going to piss people off with that. Yes, that's better. Say it like a snake. Let's see. Is there anything else from you guys tonight? Well, I kind of just did it, didn't I? Although Images is pretty great too. But Don't Look Now is a great. It falls just under my top 25, and I keep trying to find a way to force it up. But the part of my whole philosophy of film is it can't be just about what's technically great. Although if it's going to be my top 25, it probably is technically great, right? And it can't be just about how much it resonates with me, because then you start to like love trash, more than it deserves, which is fine, but it doesn't belong in the top 25. I don't know. But Don't Look Now is one of those films that I love, I respect to death, and I watch it once every, 4 years. It's not something I turn to often enough that it probably could make my top 25 in good faith. But holy God, pretty great. And Thomas says, I do love Rogue, but he goes a little bit off the rails with Man Who Fell to Earth. I think that's the point of the movie, though. I think that movie was designed to kind of be a beautiful disaster. I mean, thoughts on Let's Scare Jessica to Death? I love what I call whisper porn, which is those horror movies where like it's the sound of the movie that scares you. And Let's Scare Jessica to Death is all about like voices scaring you. So it falls into that category. I do love the movie. You know what the ultimate sound horror is film? And I'm dead serious about this. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's not the images. It's the sound of that movie. It's the discordant noise. It's the scraping of metal against metal. It's the sound of that chicken in the cage. It's the metal door slamming shut and that echo. It's the sound of the windmill outside rotating and slowly clicking because one of the arms is bent just slightly and it's clicking against the post every turn. It's the sound of that movie that I think actually is what we're responding to more than anything else. At least what I'm responding to. Cliff says he doesn't like Polanski much either. Well, I guess I'm not alone. Question: Have you seen White of the Eye? I have not. Again, I guess sometimes people think that I've seen everything. I haven't. Dan's much closer to having seen everything than I am. But he'll even say he's missing some stuff too. Talking about Man Who Fell to Earth. That's why I love it. And Bowie, of course, yeah. You see, you need an actor like Bowie to make something like that work, right? I mean, you could do it with like a Crispin Glover today. But and this is going to get me off on a tangent. I'm kind of annoyed at the modern Nicolas Cage fanaticism, because he's like the cheap ass, not quite work, got to squint to make it work version of like a David Bowie. Like, it's not genuinely off. It's weird because it's trying to be weird to me. Like, and it also has that Jim Carrey like plastic face thing going. So it's like, I'm not saying I'm completely against Nicolas Cage. He's made some great films, but like where he's at now in the career, where he's making like direct to stream shit and people are all excited about it, this is not for me. And before someone asks, no, Mandy's not an exception. Mandy bored the shit out of me. I don't think I've ever seen 5 Easy Pieces. I know what it is. Sorry, Griff. Jake says, my favorite use of sound in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the daddy long legged spiders crawling all over each other. Yeah, but again, the image is like is a lot, but the sound effect is what makes you go bonkers. Even like the death, the wheelchair murder, right in the woods. It's the roar of the chainsaw coming up with that deep timpani hit. Boom! It's like, oh my god, it's overload. You can't take it. And the fact that it's not recorded, none of this is recorded well. It all sounds like it's like siphoned through a transistor radio for some reason. Man, disturbing and impactful and brutal. It's good stuff. Scariest Asian horror film? Not the best, just scariest. I probably will go with Ringo. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, that American remake has really dulled people on the original. But I think if you had seen Ringu without ever having seen any other adaptations of Koji Suzuki's novel, it's a powerhouse. And I think it's legitimately a great horror film. There's a reason it's on my list of top 25s. It's the highest Japanese film. It's the only Japanese film on the list. Big T says Nick Cage has become the new Steven Seagal, except one can genuinely pull out the good ones. That's very fair. I'm not really talking about the actor as much as the reaction to the actor. Like, people excited that he's playing Dracula. Really? Do you not? I don't know. It feels just kind of like an intentional disrespect for what the Dracula character could be to me, which is fine. That's fine if that's what you want. But it's not for me. Jake says, TCM and Eraserhead are movies that just sound scary. You could listen to them and know they're horror films. Absolutely. And Eraserhead 100% is a horror film. Thank you for pointing that out. Too often, Lynch fans just refuse to accept that Lynch is a horror director. But looking at his body of works, he's not a typical horror film director, and he's not a commercial horror director. But besides Dune and Wild at Heart, I wouldn't consider horror films. But everything else, pretty much to one degree or another, I think qualifies, including Straight Story. Straight Story is a horrifying piece of work if you stop to think about it. It seems heartwarming until you think about what that movie is saying. It's probably one of the quietest, Midwest American horror stories possible. It's a very particular form of Gothic story. But whatever. That's a stream for another time. I recently watched a load of different adaptations of the first Ring story. My favorites are the 98 classic, but also the 95 TV movie. It's darker in story, but less horror and stuff. Yeah, it has all the science fiction trappings. Sadako is still a hermaphrodite in it. Father rapes her, right? I have a laser disc of that adaptation. It's fine, but I think the movie is so much better. I'm also a big Ring Zero fan. I think Ringo Zero is almost the equal of Ringo. It works. It's a different type of story, but it's working in completely different ways. But it really doesn't lean on the first film as much as Ringu 2 did, right? Ringu 2 kind of needs the first film to exist and to tell its story, whereas Ring Zero, it definitely informs it in its third act, but it legitimately builds and deserves the reaction to the third act, which I think is as scary as anything in the first film. Jake, Straight Story is scary might not be the right word, but again, the horror genre is a genre of the dramatic arts that traffics in all the dark emotions, right? That's how you can have, Texas Chainsaw sit alongside The Innocents, for instance. Like, it's a wide genre. Straight Story is a film about a dying man wanting to visit his dying friend, and the fact that society doesn't have a way to naturally facilitate that. So he defiantly sets off on a lawnmower across the state to try and mourn properly for what is coming, both for his friend and himself. And in that respect, it's heartwarming in a way, but it's more disturbing because there's an indictment right under the surface of how uncaring our society is, that there wouldn't be a way for a man to see his friend before they both leave. I think that Lynch very cleverly keeps things happening in that, even though it has a very slow pace. He keeps things happening that keeps you not thinking about what the movie is really about. But I would argue that last image of the two men on a porch, right? There's such a heaviness that hangs over that moment, and it's beautiful, but it also is kind of sad, and not for the characters, sad for us. Hope that's how I feel about it. You may disagree with all that. Haven't seen it, sorry to say. Griff, I'm actually working on something that will answer that question, so I'm not going to answer it tonight. Jake is asking about Sion Sono, Suicide Club, Cold Fish, Strange Circus. All those films, I haven't seen Strange Circus, but I have seen Cold Fish and Suicide Club. They're all films that I feel like are intentionally missing part of their stories. And sometimes I like that. Like, there's artists that definitely omit information from their films intentionally to make you work a little bit harder for them. I'm not sure it completely works for me. I'm not sure. I need to revisit them, and I need to see Strange Circus. He also says, I think the cook is the most frightening character in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He flirts with humanity, showing signs of remorse, but he can't help himself. I like it because I think he's an interesting character because he's the only one that's lying in that film. Everyone else is very earnest about what they're doing, and he's the one who says stuff that is obviously untrue. Like, I just can't get any pleasure out of killing, as he's beating a girl in a bag with a broom. It's there's a certain amount of dishonesty in that character, right? He has a legitimate business, but he's also clearly cooking human beings as barbecue in the back room. Like, and the movie very smartly, and I love Toby Hooper for this. He can introduce idea visually, and he doesn't feel the need to explain it to you. He trusts that you'll get it. I wish we had more directors that were that way. And it's not the directors so much, really. It's really the studios and the distributors. But yeah, I think truthfully, of the villains, he has the most character of any of them. So maybe saying that he's your favorite character or the most frightening character, yeah, because he has the most to him. Leatherface is pure emotion, but there's not much character there, and I think it's great for what he is. But if I was to say that you can't say, if you can't physically describe Leatherface, describe him, but don't use any words to describe him physically. You could do a few things like childish, violent, but you wouldn't paint a real picture what that character is. I think you could get there with the cook. You could describe the cook without talking about him physically at all. And that means he's a better character, ultimately. And I'm going to be wrapping it up shortly because I do have to sleep so badly. But Thomas says, David Lynch is one of the best explorers of the mind through art we have at the moment. I want to say Mulholland Drive is my favorite, but there's something about Inland Empire he taps into something else. You had me with Mulholland Drive because that is my favorite Lynch film, but Inland Empire is my least favorite of his work. I would argue that it's a film that might threaten his entire discography in ways. I'm currently working on my Cronenberg retrospective, which is taking me forever because I want to get it right. But after that, I am going to be going back to Lynch and talking about Twin Peaks as a piece of art and as a piece of writing. I will have in there a little bit to say about Inland Empire, because I think Inland Empire gets wrong everything that season 3 of Peaks gets right. And they're very similar projects. But in one case, you see Lynch allowing himself too much freedom, and it goes off the rails in all the wrong ways. And in the other case, you have a thing where he was working under constraints that were imposed upon him. Just the right level of restraints, I think. And while I have issues with season 3, I think it's way better than anything we deserved. So, you, sir, need to do that sound effect again. You did 10 minutes ago. No, but you need a few more S's still. Jim Cito owns that movie for me. The scenes with him in the truck where he goes back and forth between Sweet Talking Sally and Continue to Tormenting Her. Yeah, no, I mean, it's an amazing performance. Natural performance, true. It doesn't feel like a theatrical performance where he's like speaking to the back of the theater, right? It feels like he's in that truck, which is what makes good film acting as opposed to good theatrical training. I'll always say this, like there's people who really love some of the really broad stuff in horror. Like to me, Robert Englund in the later Nightmare on Elm Street films was always projecting to the back of the theater. And I think that's the wrong move for horror. Again, I don't like horror comedies, so of course that's going to inform my opinion, but I like really natural performances in horror. And I think Jim Cito is exactly that example of someone who comes off really natural. Even in the second film, whereas everything is broader and bigger, I think he still kind of maintains that level of naturalistic acting. I can't disagree. It is bizarre for what it is, but the man wanted to capture a dream, and there's no denying the whole movie is like a dream on film, more of an experience film than for plot. Yeah. Talking about Inland Empire, but here's the thing: you have to be able to watch the movie. Like I would argue that you get to a certain Warholian point, whereas a can of Campbell soup the message of the painting becomes more important than the painting, right? And at that point, it's a little bit up its own ass too much for my taste. And I'm a guy who will give Lynch much more room to hang himself than most people will. To me, like Mulholland Drive is a perfect kind of horror puzzle as film goes, and it's not a terribly complex film when you break it down, but I love the fact that it feels complete and it feels like a film that can be watched. Inland Empire is a slog to get through. It's hard to get through, and I'm glad it has its audience. I'm glad you're part of it. It's just not for me. I could get used to hearing that. Yeah, I think Mulholland Drive is becoming everyone's favorite Lynch film. The more the more the years go on, there's just a lot to love about it. It's a stone cold masterpiece of the horror genre. I like House on Sorority Row. I actually think that the remake, Sorority Row, is one of the better of the cycle of remakes we got in that period. It's not perfect, but it's not a remake in any way of the original, but I think it's successful as a film. House on Sorority Row feels a little more grindhouse than a lot of the slasher films that were coming out at that time. Not as slashery as, I guess, Don't Go in the House, but I appreciate the fact that it feels a little grimier. I think that's a good thing. And Jake says he thinks it's more thoughtful than most slashers. My favorite of the decade. Don't Go in the House is a close second. It's funny that you mentioned that after I just mentioned it, because your comment came right after I said it. But so you like the kind of grimy but smart slashers. That's not a bad place to be. It's not a bad place to be. All right, guys, I'm about ready to say goodnight to you all. You've made it a really fun stream. I know we don't do this enough, and I got to change that. December is not going to be an easy month for me, and there's going to be a part of the month that is spent promoting the book. So I want to thank you guys for hanging with me tonight, because we might not get a chance to do this again before January. If that's the case, like, enjoy what you're going to enjoy for the coming month, and if that's with family, if that's holidays, if that's just movies and books and comic books, and most importantly, friends, then enjoy those things, because every day the world gets a little bit wilder and weirder, and not always in the good ways that I like wild and weird. So make sure you're enjoying every one of them. Don't settle for anything less. It's a crazy, messed up world, and we're the best thing in it. And don't you forget it. Have a great night, guys.
Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
What? Wait. What?
I watched
Lucas Animated Work. And Hollywood.
Yeah, I love
it. We can do it.
You okay, buddy?
Yeah.
You okay?
Oh,
Who said
no.
witchcraft doesn't work?
I'll be back in a moment.
That's concerning.
That was a Blair Witch ending right there.